Hi guys, welcome back to Alamat, where we translate and narrate Philippine myths, urban legends, and horror stories to share with the world. Our tale for this week is about an employee that sneaks around the office and sprays a specific perfume on different people. This tale is called I Fired an Employee for Spraying Perfume by Ray Fran 1111. I have just gotten word from upper management that I would need to raise an urgent concern to a certain employee named George due to a series of complaints from several other employees on our floor. I was briefed on a phone call inside my office. A few moments later, as expected, my assistant, Gloria, arrived to hand me a stack of documents with some containing colored folders. She left after a brief exchange of usual office banter. I shuffled through the pile of documents, starting somewhere in the middle since the top document is just employee information as I glanced over it. I raised a brow at what I'm reading, sometimes squinting and removing my glasses to briefly rub my eyes to make sure of what I was seeing. George apparently lost his wife to a car accident, in which several employees reported that after that, his behavior turned to a creepy route as he began to bring some kind of transparent liquid held in a small glass container and spray it randomly among his coworkers at this floor. He was reported to be stalking several corners of this floor's halls to ambush employees and spray that unknown liquid all over the body of his chosen victim. There were some CCTV camera pictures attached on the documents that just showed him leaning on his back against the wall, holding the said container with both hands pressed on his chest, glancing sideways, waiting on the corners of the floor. No motive was concluded for his actions, since it seems he's choosing employees randomly, for some of which didn't even know him. No adverse effects were found when sprayed with the liquid, nor any significant unpleasant odor was produced. The smell was described as a familiar flower being sold in churches in the Philippines. So it's somewhat like a sampaguita perfume? This has been happening for a week now. It's quite surprising that no one reported this as soon as it happened the first time. I felt a little stupid that I didn't notice this as well. Our floor is indeed big. The biggest concern of management was that he was inside the female's comfort room, hiding inside one of the cubicles, and he ambushed two female employees chatting inside. Now, that's a fireable offense, I think. I muttered to myself, conflicted of the peculiarity of this whole ordeal. I couldn't make sense of any of this. He didn't do anything else but sprayed perfume and left immediately after. All in all, he ambushed 10 people in total to this date. What a morning to be the head of the department. He seems to be only interested in our floor, particularly since I haven't seen a report from any other floors below or upstairs. Thank God for that. George was known to be a quirky guy in the office. I personally interacted with him, and his character sticks as the office clown. Chill, carefree, and pretty much happy, and tries to always not to leave you without a joke. He did his share of office pranks, but this is just, I can't say way out of line, since no reported damage was done besides two shocked faces inside the comfort room. It's just weird. I intended to find out more about this. I paged Gloria to call George to my office. Admittedly, management already beat the hammer on this one, especially that the company has zero tolerance towards sexual harassment. I'm afraid I have to fire him, but I'm hoping that there is an explanation I could use to persuade the management to make him take a leave instead. I mean, the man recently went through the death of his wife, for crying out loud. He might be losing it and needs help. A few minutes after, I heard a brief scream just right outside my office. It was my assistant's voice, in which a slap came after. George is here, Gloria said, opened my door slightly ajar, revealing a pissed off face. I nodded. She paved way for George, now opening the door wide for him to enter, in which I immediately noticed that he was holding the perfume on his right hand as he went in. George stood there with his free hand comforting his left cheek. Gloria then closed the door. "Take a seat, George," I said to him, pointing to one of the empty seats on the other side of my desk. He was just standing near the door, holding the perfume tightly, avoiding eye contact, and somewhat twitchy. He complied after a few seconds and kept the perfume in his pocket. He sat in front of me, somewhat calm, sweating, and his hands were on his lap. Tension filled the room's atmosphere. "Do you know why I called you here?" I said. Silence greeted me. He remained seated while twitching, still trying his best to avoid eye contact. I began to notice his eye bags were dark and heavy, with eyes almost teary. "Is there something wrong? Why won't you look at me? Are you okay?" He remained silent once more. I clenched my fist slightly under the table on that exchange. I raised both of my hands to rest on the desk. Taking a deep breath, his Adam's apple moved as sweat falls down from his face towards the collar of his polo. He finally spoke. "Am I being fired?" he said, somewhat stuttering. I can't be fired right now. There's still so many of you. I'm not done yet," he continued. I raised a brow, slightly squinting, tilting my head a few degrees to the right, focusing on his expression. I transitioned to resting my elbows on the table, hands crossed, fingers intertwined, raised near my lips, thinking of a possible response to what he just said. "What do you mean?" I asked. He didn't reply. Tired, I just continued to the heart of the matter. "Why did you spray all these employees?" "I assume you sprayed Gloria out there as well, pissing her off," I said, voice almost raising, observing the fresh redness on the left cheek. I can't help it. Everyone just reeked," he said with his hands gripping the cloth of his slacks, head facing down, body trembling a little. "Are you messing with me, George? What the actual fuck? Is that really your reason? Everyone just has bad body odor for the past few days?" No, he said, shaking his head while still looking down. "Everyone reeked of death." He continued with a stern face leaning towards me while he moved near on the edge of the seat, now facing me. Then after a few seconds, he went back to his passive position. I pressed the hidden button underneath my desk, signaling security that I was in danger. In that moment, I leaned back at my chair, placing my hands limp on the sides, baffled with his reply. "You have clearly gone insane, George. You need a break. I know I'm going to say this at a bad time, especially with what happened with your wife. But clearly, you need a psych evaluation. You need to go to a hospital. I would try my best to persuade the upper management to not fire you since you were a stellar employee. But right now, we can't have your behavior disrupting our coworkers. For now, I would put you on indefinite leave. The length depending on your evaluation," I said, trying to stay calm, maintaining my posture, hands back on the table, eyes focused on George, and my heart pounding. George stood up with an expression mixed with anger and worry. Hands firmly spread flat on top of the table. He glared at me. I just faced him with a stern expression, bracing myself for the impending violence as his sweat drops on the table. As he began to move, security rushed to the scene, making both of us flinch for a few seconds. George reached out to his right pocket to fetch his perfume and sprayed me several times, frantically. I could smell the fresh fragrance of sampaguita touch my skin and clothes. I stood up in the development, head facing the opposite direction, hands laid out in front to protect any liquid going to my eyes as George continued spraying. Security tackled him to the ground, making him loose the perfume from his grip and eventually bind his hands with handcuffs. He struggled immensely, panting, grunting, but there was no match to the collective strength of two officers that subdued him. My eyes followed him to the ground. "You are making a big mistake. Please unbind me. More and more are reeking of death as every hour passes. The floor is in danger," he said, while struggling with his head pressed hard on the office carpet, tears dripping from his face. I ordered security to bring him to a nearby prison until I figure out what to do given the developments. I have decided at the moment that I would fire him. I still felt conflicted, having looked at his face, eyes desperate for help. But I believe he might be a threat to our department. Given that thought, I immediately signed the papers of letting him go, shaking off the feeling of guilt and pity. An hour passed as security personnel notified me through the phone that George is now held inside the nearby prison, awaiting sentence. I briefly instructed them to give me a few minutes to process the documents, and I would deal with the matter as soon as possible. I was on the verge of finalizing the papers until a loud noise caught my attention, halting my work. It sounded like a small explosion, in which I assume was just someone getting clumsy again, and I shrugged it off. Another loud sound came after making me almost fall off my seat. I could now hear several people screaming outside. I realized they were gunshots, eventually filling the halls with a deafening noise, one shot at a time. Screams began losing volume as it progressed. I hid underneath the table after quickly locking the door of my office and dragging Gloria, whimpering underneath her desk, to hide with me in my room. I turned off the lights on both rooms of the office as well, as a precaution. I then called the police. It turns out a previously fired employee decided to turn our floor into a bloodbath. I requested to be blindfolded. I was escorted out of the building, sparing myself from the horror that awaits outside my office. There were only 12 survivors, that includes me. From what I heard, the shooter committed suicide as soon as several officers swarmed our floor, shooting himself through the jaw. The incident was the news of the month, the year even. I gave up the job immediately and became a freelancer, away from corporate bureaucracy and more into appreciating life. I didn't bother myself to check up on what happened to the company. God bless the souls of everyone who lost their lives on that day. I'm lucky to be alive. I just can't shake off the feeling I needed to thank someone. That's it for this week. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this to your friends and family. If you have stories you would want me to narrate, send them over at mralamatph@gmail.com. Salamat guys, and see you in the next one.